must unite what has been set asunder.
We are TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
The people were gathered lightheartedly and confident at the evening meal. When the news burst upon them, it was like a thunderbolt out of an azure sky. Altgett holds Illinois hard and fast in the Democratic line. This elects Bryan, President of the United States. They sat as if paralyzed with a nameless dread, and when they conversed, it was with bated breath and throbbing hearts. Excerpt from The Last President. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio. And this evening, I have as co-host Kathy Dunson. We will be covering a Q&A and responding to a lot of the questions that you have asked us over the past couple of weeks. Kathy, are you there, sister?
I am. Good evening, everybody.
All right. And so anyways, what I had read from is an excerpt, as I said, from a book called The Last President, which this is interesting. One of our listeners brought it to my attention that there were a couple of books written by an Ingersoll, what was the guy's last name, Kathy?
Lockwood.
Ingersoll Lockwood. And this individual, these books were published in the 1800s, I believe, and one is called The Last President. The other is called Baron Trump, interestingly enough. But both seem to predict Donald Trump coming out of nowhere and becoming president. And it's been confirmed that these books are authentic. They are in the Library of Congress, and they have been there for a very long time, which confirms that, this is not just fake news fad put out there just to...
Here's something.
Yeah, please.
Even Snopes says it's mostly true.
Imagine that.
Yeah, they would definitely say it's false, but they even say,
Yeah, so anyways, I have not read the fullness of the book, but I have downloaded the PDFs. You can find them available freely. Just look for the name of the author and the name of the books, and you can, get the PDFs. There are individuals that have done YouTubes on shorts, excerpts, and readings of these particular books, and also those that have reviewed the material and have shared and highlight the different things that seemingly connect to where we are. And I think just even the titles themselves, Baron Trump and The Last President, that those are certainly intriguing titles. Considering a lot of people believe that, that Trump could be the last president, and whether that's true or not, I know they said that about Obama too, but definitely interesting times that we're living in, especially considering, the whole Revelation 12 sign that just occurred.
Do you know that Trump's youngest son's name is Barron?
No.
Yes.
Huh.
Yeah,
interesting.
So that's interesting too. I'm
yeah,
pretty sure,
that's interesting as well. Yeah, no, I'm not.
I'm seeing two
videos
on that. It's. I just put in search Ingersoll, Lockwood, Trump, last president, and several articles, and then these two videos came up. So if anyone wants to do that, they can find it easy. So that looks real interesting.
Yeah, it's at least intriguing, and something that people should at least give a little bit of introspection into. I know myself, when I first discovered it, or when it was first brought to my attention, it was most certainly interesting, to say the least. But anyways, this evening, as I said, we're going to be answering a lot of questions that have been put forth. We're going to be doing a monthly Q&A. I do try to answer a lot of the questions that many of you send to me, and that you can contact us through Sacred Word Publishing. Carol has set up on there specifically for you to be able to submit your question, and both Carol and Kathy are very attentive in bringing it to my attention, and allowing me, giving me opportunity to answer without it slipping my mind. And so we do want to, especially those of you that are just now getting into either my personal books or the books that we release through Sacred Word Publishing, that some of the questions are related to some of those releases, and we will be highlighting some of the latest releases, as well as is connected to the extra biblical material. And many of you do have questions along the lines of what to study with regard to the extra biblical books, and what I recommend and all. But we'll get into that as we go. Kathy, is there anything that you'd like to bring up before we get started? I know you said that it'd probably take us 6 hours, and considering we only have 2.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think my list is pretty good, but, as far as being able to get through it, but we tend to chit chat back and forth on these, and it's always good. And we'll just be more consistent about having these once a month.
Yeah. And then whatever we don't get to this evening, we'll just keep the list going. But certainly, send us your questions or your commentary or anything of that nature, and we'll try to
through the website, or you could also email me, perelandra77@gmail.com, PERELANDRA77@gmail.com. And that's also to get on my email list, and for debate information, and not debate, for get-togethers, meetups. Yes, that's it.
Yes.
Anyway, I want to be sure.
Which we'll be releasing that too.
Yeah.
A date for a meetup very soon.
Yeah.
It'll probably be in the middle of October, but we'll be announcing that and releasing that as well.
Okay. Well, I wanted to start off with a question I get from people, and mostly, I mentioned this earlier today, mostly I don't get it in the form of a question. I get it in the form of, will you please pray for me, because I'm going to be talking to my family this weekend about flat Earth. And I generally come back to them and say, I don't do that with my family. I have learned over the years that they're not listening to this stuff. They don't listen to they won't listen to investment information, or basic stuff. So my advice has always been, if they're going to come and ask you about it, if they, just to let it. Mark Sargent always says, about the Fight Club line about, what happens at Fight Club stays in Fight Club. But anyway, at any rate, I want you to talk some on that, but I wanted to read a little excerpt from an article by Noel Hadley. He has a blog. It's called Our Way is the Highway. And let me read this. He titled it, Biblical Literalists Are the New Apostates, and His Prayers Go Out. Reflections in Flat Earth from Charleston, South Carolina. Tonight, my heart is troubled. Personally, I feel at peace, resting in Jesus Yeshua, and yet walking the double row of grand oaks, stopping occasionally to swipe my fingers along hanging webs of moss. So many faces of friends and loved ones come to mind. Earlier in the evening, I went out on the boat with my family. Even then, I was pressed with the same heavy heart. I feel such sorrow for those who refuse to wake up from their lukewarm slumber, always tossing and turning between a declared fervent love of the Lord and frozen hibernation in worldly adoration as they go about with the motions of their society, almost robotic. So many of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Earlier this summer, my wife and I had planned to fly from Canada to Southern California so that we might celebrate our twin son's 3rd birthday with family. We were excited. Yet my father, being a former pastor, was so embarrassed by my coming out about flat earth and the book deal which resulted from it, actually sold his house and moved away without telling us. No joke. We were supposed to stay with him for 3 weeks. Everything had been planned for an entire year. I guess he just expected us to buy tickets and show up to the escrow sign. When we made last-minute plans to stay with my wife's twin sister, her husband made it clear, cease and desist, that we were not welcome to stay under his roof unless I recanted of my flat earth and rapture talk. He's a church-attending Christian, by the way. And that's just the opening on this article, and that's our way is the highway.wordpress.com. And you can find that and read it all. And Noel and I will chat on Messenger, and he said to me, they ended up not going. But he said, irony is the only reason I'm a flat earther is because he raised me right to take the scripture literally, sola scriptura, and all that scripture interprets scripture, never science.
It is insane to me what degrees and to what lengths individuals will go to hold on to their indoctrination and to support what they think they know as truth. And I know myself coming out on this many years ago, going public with this stance, that many of my listeners initially were warning vociferously, almost threateningly, that you're going to lose your what little respect, if I had any at that time, but because I come out with so many other controversial issues, but they were like, you're going to lose your credibility. I'm certainly not going to listen to you anymore. This is lunacy. You're crazy. Why don't you, wake up and join the rest of us here in the real world? Things like that. I mean, just, and this was all from people that just refused to even investigate it. And what I went through with one of my friends at the time, who's also a broadcaster, but we were the best of friends, and I was quite often on his show, and helped him actually to do his own and get going with his. But my goodness, this issue caused such division that we haven't even spoken since that time, and are no longer even friends. But yeah, this issue causes such tremendous division, especially, and I don't know, because I'm not a pastor's son. I wasn't raised by, somebody that knew and read and had studied the Bible for however many years his father had. But certainly, when you investigate and honestly open yourself to even just the Genesis narrative with the timeline of creation, it's very clear that you cannot mesh what is revealed within the scriptures with what is postulated in theory with the whole model of planetary accretion and how the solar system came into being and how the earth was coalesced. All those things just don't jive with one another. But again, so many people say and try to affirm that this particular topic is meaningless, nonsensical, and divisive, and that it's put out as a psyop in order to make Christians look stupid or Christians to look bad. But in truth, it's the opposite. The heliocentric system and the Copernican model is the real psyop, and that it has been so carefully orchestrated and put forth over the minds and the consciousness of humanity, that most of the people that are grown up in the educational systems now, they buy into the whole premise that that we evolved as some primordial soup, and that we humans specifically evolved of monkeys because of this Darwinian ever-expanding universe that all just came about out of nothing from some crazy Big Bang.
Right. And I think this revelation now, the true biblical cosmology coming so obviously to the forefront right now, it's just bringing us back to God's word, and to not be willing to even look to question it. The study that we've done, the research that we've done, it only gets stronger the more we look back in history, the more we look now at experiments that are being done, and there are more all the time. It's stronger and stronger, the case for the true biblical cosmology, and the heliocentric falls completely apart. The most cursory examination, it's the willingness to be able to examine it at all. And it's absolutely, it's stunning. It's amazing to see this total breakdown, especially in the Christian, and their ability to look at it. So how do you feel about talking to family on the subject at all, or friends that don't want to hear it, or just, I mean, yours is different. Your case and Noel's case is different because you're out there publicly than, say, myself. Yeah. I walk around wearing my Firmament T-shirt, no question, ever.
I personally don't advise people to bring this up to their family or their friends until they're armed with the truth. Until you have investigated it to such a degree that you are comfortable with answering questions, that if you're still a newbie to this particular issue and you haven't really looked at it and investigated it at all, don't come out unless you know what you're talking about, because you're going to get bombarded. And if you don't understand what you're saying and you don't have the right questions to respond to individuals, you're just going to make yourself sound foolish, and then it's just going to cause your family members to think you're nuts anyways. And so
and it's really hard to get someone to even watch a short video about it.
Yeah.
That's really surprising.
The whole thing about this, though, is that it is really incredibly easy to confirm that the heliocentric worldview is a bunk and a faulty postulation that has been taught and accepted by the world based on lies and deception. And that really, because it's easy to determine that the earth is not moving at any rate of speed, and most certainly not at 1,037 miles an hour at the equator, which again is, as I said in the debate with Stephen Pigeon, is faster than the speed of sound, and also faster than a bullet fired from a 45 caliber or 22 caliber pistol. And that is just sheer lunacy when you actually think about it and consider what we had bought into. And then the other thing is that there is no measurable curvature. You can obviously see that there are islands, statues like the Statue of Liberty, the different cityscapes like Joshua Nowicki's as far as the Chicago skyline, that all of these things can be seen in excess of what is the scientific formula for determining the official curvature of the Earth, as put forth by the scientists and NASA and others. And so it's very easy to determine. And you go to the beach, you look out of the horizon, the ocean spread from one corner to the other, from east to west across your full line of sight. It is completely flat. There's no curvature.
I just think it's that we're a product of this massive mind control. And I was a young person when the first moon landing occurred, and that is a mind control and a kind of spell, like 9/11, like they had that on every television screen. They put us through these things, like movies, and they have this spinning globe and all this, and there's so many instances that the globe is placed. It's a massive form of mind control, and that's why, because I can remember how hard it was to consider and how hard it has been to walk through understanding certain aspects, like satellites. That was really hard to conceive of. No, what do you mean there aren't any satellites? It's because there's so much associated with each of these components that make up what this heliocentric lie is. But once you start to question and have an open mind to look at it, you can understand, because now, since you and I started looking at it, there's a wealth of information, and it all just starts to fall apart. And there is nothing I have seen that has remained a solid question to me. Everything has come to be exposed, and there's more and more. Like, I was just trying to watch Dr. Zach's latest video about Aristophanes, and Jaron did a really great one on Aristophanes. Now I can't remember for the life of me exactly what it was about, but this stuff is out there and it's building and growing every day. So, and actually in the community itself, and just the awareness in the public. I mean, B.O.B. came out with something just the other day. He was not in Time magazine, and there's another NFL player, basketball player, some other sports player just today.
Sammy Watkins. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And it's growing at an incredible rate. And the Flat Earth Conference in another month is all. So,
that's going to blow it out of the water.
It's getting, multiple documentaries. There is so much good stuff. I see the smart people, the really thinking people that are looking at this. They're willing to look at it. Why wouldn't you be willing to look at something that was brought to you by a space agency that wastes your money, lies to you at every turn, and it's so easily discovered.
Debunked. Yeah.
These things. So all of that is true. If you look back at, what is this supporting, the Big Bang, the Big Bang and evolution, all of these things that come to you from people who hate Christ with a passion, and everything that NASA's built on. Hubble, one of the worst quotes about, you couldn't possibly stand, I don't know what the quote is, for Christianity to be upheld. So there was no way that they were going to do it. But everything, one on another, builds this case that it's Satan against, God's word. And you have to just go back to it and question it. And the problem is Christianity that is saying, the mainstream Christianity that is in these big box churches, that's a problem to begin with, that they don't know who's infiltrated them, why they have their musicians that for the most part we really like. They're up there with pyramids and flashing lights, and they've got all this deception going on, and they don't know it. But those are the people that they need to wake up. They have wed themselves to the world, and that's where we are right now. And so this is a huge awakening, and people need to get on board and look at it. That's why 2 years ago, when I was involved with that same person you were talking about, I said, we've got to look at this. Christians need to be out there in this. This is our thing. So, I get passionate about this, and I don't want people to have their joy in this new discovery really harmed and wounded because they try and tell a family member. Because, for myself, I think it was at Thanksgiving in 2015, I thought I'd go in and say, hey, here's another thing, the earth's flat. But I knew better, and I had to restrain myself, even though I thought I could have said it funny. No, it would have broke my heart to have the response I could have expected. So, and it's really hard after all I've looked through. I don't feel like I could have the conversation, but see, that's me. That's you can, I can't. Other people can. My ego, I guess, bruises real easy, and anyway, I'm better online.
We'll be right back, everyone. All right, welcome back, everybody, for our next segment. One final comment on the whole thing of going to family members. Just realize that, still most of the world has no idea with regard to this as far as truth. And still most of the world still does not know about 9/11 and the truth of that, or the serpent seed, or the New World Order. And so most are caught up in slumber, and they are walking through life as if they're zombies, and they have no concern for the truth. They care nothing about it. They don't even want to know anything about it. And so honor people for where they are, and realize that the elect is but a small minority, and most people in their entire lifetime will never even wake up to question or to introspect on any of these things. But for those that do know and that are awakened, seek fellowship amongst those kind of people. And if you'd like, you can join the group Zen Garcia Eyes Wide Open on Facebook for discussion with others of like mind. Come together in truth-seeking groups like the one that we're starting monthly now here in Atlanta in this area, and seek to find others that already know about these kind of things, to where you don't have to educate them. And especially for your loved ones and family members, I know that when I first woke up to 9/11, it was so important to me, and I wanted them so badly to know the truth about those things that that's all I would speak about. And really, my family members, only 2 people in my family are awakened to this, but everybody else didn't even want to hear about it, didn't want to discuss it, and I just kind of drove them away. And most of my family thinks I'm nuts, as I'm sure that it's the same way with most of your family members, and that all of us have gone through similar awakening and similar confrontation and conflict with our loved ones and our friends. And so I say, this was a lesson that I had to learn, as all of you are learning as well. Just honor people for where they are, plant seeds, and only bring it up if it comes up in discussion. Don't feel a need to make every conversation about this or about flat earth or 9/11 or whatever. Just whenever it does present itself and you have opportunity, then go there. But otherwise, don't throw pearls before swine. All right.
Yeah, you want to learn yourself to be ready if they come to you and want to ask. That's really good advice. Okay, let's move on. This is from Stephanie, and she was very concerned. Her father, a Catholic and scholar, has become involved with pseudo-Dionysus and is claiming there is no true evil or devil based on the writing from Pseudo-Dionysus, the complete works. she has no idea how to even respond or where to begin scripturally, and she's been in prayer about this. And I think that this might have some relationship with, I don't know. I'm just going to throw this other question I had in, and it's recently I heard David Carrico teach that Lucifer and Satan are not the same entity. And what do you think about that? Those are kind of related.
Okay, I'll approach the Satan and Lucifer question first. I am not convinced of that. In my opinion, the Bible says that out of the mouths of 2 or 3 witnesses shall the truth be established. I do not see 3 witnesses for that. But if somebody can, present me further information, but in all that I've read and all that I've studied, I don't see the differentiation. I actually see that Satan, meaning adversary, is the title that Lucifer took when cast out of the heavens, and that he's also known as the angel Samael, the angel of death. That's his original Hebrew name. He's also called Azazel in the Apocalypse of Abraham. But in my opinion, it is the same entity. It's the cherub that was cast out that we read about in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. But again, I remain open, and if somebody has 3 witnesses where they can show me, then I would, I would investigate it with open mind. I'm not rigid on anything. But as of right now, I don't see multiple witnesses for that in either the scriptures or even the extra biblical text. But now, with regard to the Stephanie and with regard to her father, this is another one of those things that I don't believe it is necessary for us to try to argue with individuals that have a certain mindset. This was the same thing with when I was presenting with certain people. I'm not even going to bring up names, but we've done shows, and you know who I'm talking about, Kathy. There's been a couple people that I've done shows with. One believes that Yahweh of the Old Testament is the Satan, and another one believes that Christ never existed. I mean, there's so many different perspectives that are being taught by the New Age. A lot of it that Christ was an ascended master, or that he's part of the Great White Brotherhood, or that he's one of the ancient aliens. There's so many deceptions out there that, in my opinion, I think it's best to pray for individuals like that and allow God to move them and to bring forth revelation. But that, again, unless you are well studied and you know of what you're talking about, it's just, you're just going to get into an argument with somebody that's not willing to listen, and you're just going to cause such division that you'll drive your loved ones away. And it's, in my opinion, it's not worth it, because it's not it's not good effort. As far as now, if somebody is willing to listen and you are able to bring forth and share with them things that you've studied, things that you've learned, and that they are open-minded, and you can have a discussion where you honor and respect each other and bringing forth differences of perspective or opinion, well, that's a completely different thing. But in my opinion, that's a very rare kind of relating, and that's something that just does not usually exist in dynamics where family members are getting together and arguing over religion or politics or something of that nature. And so, again, in my opinion, I think people should pray for others and allow God to move them, and allow the Holy Spirit to bring them forth to truth and revelation. And that happens a lot. I mean, my son, he was atheist for the very longest time, and just totally anti-Christian and totally anti everything biblical, but he came full circle, and I was able to just give him books, extra biblical books, and to point out certain things and allow him to study and research for himself, and he was able to come full circle. And so you can't force it down somebody's throat or try to rip open their skulls and, or slam it into them. That just doesn't work. You can plant seeds and hopefully those things will sprout and grow. But again, you have to have fertile ground that you plant seeds, and if it just falls on the pavement, it's going to just dry up and wither. And so a person really has to be receptive and willing. And if they're not, in my opinion, you're just wasting your time.
Yeah. And prayer is going to be a big thing for all of us. That happened with my son. I know that happened with me. This is a Torah question, and for our time. Hi, Kathy. How do I address my husband's belief that the Torah has been done away with by using scripture? I showed in Matthew 5 where it clearly says that Yeshua did not come to do away with the law, but he argues that the verses where Yeshua ups the ante and talks about if you hate your brother, you have killed, etc., means that the old law is superseded. So what does Zen have to say on this topic, or do you have any shows on this topic?
In my opinion, it's very easy to show that Christ, even his life, that he came to fulfill the law, and that the Levitical feast days, the 7 holy days as put forth by the Father in Leviticus 23, that his first coming fulfilled the first 4 feasts, and that his next coming will fulfill the next 3. He didn't come to establish Christmas or Easter or any of these other pagan holidays, but he actually fulfilled the Levitical feast days as laid out by Yahweh Elohim in the Old Testament. And so the Old Testament and the New Testament, you can't separate one from the other, as so many people do. And so many say that we're under a new covenant. And even though we are, yes, we are under a new covenant, and we no longer have to sacrifice animals or offer up blood, but still, Christ came to fulfill the law and not to do away with it or to replace it. And it's easy to see that within the scriptures, because he even told his apostles that if you love me, you will follow the commandments, that you will do. And he says that he and the Father are one. And so, and looking back and investigating and studying even the scriptures as they were given to the patriarchs and passed down through, for instance, Adam, even when he was being cast out of paradise, he was given 5 books: the book of the sons, the book of the generations of man, the book of the book of the wars of the Lord, the book of astrology. I forget the other one, but he was given these books, and they had prophetic within them the story of his seed line and those that would be born of his line. And he knew that Yeshua would be born of a virgin and that he would come into the flesh in order to redeem him. And these prophecies were passed down through even to Enoch. Enoch writes about the Son of Man in the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, which is an ancient text about the 12 tribes, the patriarchs of the 12 tribes as born to Jacob, that they quote and reference the book of Enoch and also the prophecies contained within it. And they even tell their children about how they're going to fall away and to be vigilant not to, and all these things. I mean, the story of Moses, his coming, how they would be 400 years under the bondage of Egypt from the time of Joseph onward. all of these things were forecasted and predicted and laid out within these particular scriptures, and these things were fulfilled. Even the prophecies of the Old Testament, 319, I believe, which are associated to Christ in the Old Testament, were fulfilled by his coming. And so it's clear that the Old Testament and the New Testament are one. And if you ever study my books, especially with the Great Contest, I reveal how the war in heaven ties together with the enmity between the seed lines and the harvest of the wheat and the tares. And that is a theme which unites the Genesis to Revelation, and how this theme is interwoven as far as the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent as it plays out all throughout history, even uniting the death of Abel at the hands of his half-brother Cain to the same thing that Christ speaks about in the New Testament, with the Pharisees being the murderers of the prophets from Abel to Zacharias. Zacharias being the father of John the Baptist, who was killed in the Holy of Holies, and John the Baptist being the true heir, the high priest. But of course, we know he was beheaded. But anyway, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were the seed of Cain that had usurped the scribes and also the Levitical priesthood. And that's a full story. I'll be telling that in the third book of the Great Contest trilogy, which should be out sometime after the new year. But it's a very long and in-depth story. But again, it's another one of those themes that unites the Old and the New Testament together, along with all of the extra biblical material, and that when you understand how all these things interrelate and interweave through the fullness of the biblical narrative, then you can see that you can't separate one from the other.
Okay, continuing on this theme, question from Noel. Aside from the big three, Enoch and Jubilees and Jasher, what is the one extra biblical text that you might recommend to read?
One?
Yeah, he said one, but I want you to also mention the new books that we've just released that you've been working on. And also, just to add on to this, speaking of Enoch, I get the question a lot, which version of the book of Enoch do you recommend? And I wanted to point them to the collected works of Enoch the prophet, and maybe you could just explain that kind of briefly.
Yeah, okay. As far as one, because
Book of the Bee.
Well, yeah, the Book of the Bee is great. I love that one. But also the Cave of Treasures is another great one. The Chronicles of Jeremiah, because all of them
haven't done that yet.
Yeah, all of them cover in fullness just like the Pentateuch, the story, as far as the creation. Yeah, and they cover everything. And so I love them all. I study and read all of them because I find all of them beneficial for filling in. Now, as far as it's not an extra biblical text, but I recommend that people read the Targum. And the reason I say read the Targum is because it is the oldest version of the Hebrew Torah that we can get in this day and age. And it dates back 2,000 years, is 2,000 years older than the King James version of the Bible. It is the original, it's the first translation of the Hebrew Torah into a different language, that being Aramaic. And that took place during the diaspora when the book of Daniel, the book of Jeremiah, the book of Ezra, these texts were written into Aramaic themselves. That they are the only portion of the Bible that was written in Aramaic, and the reason being is because it was during that time that they were living in Babylon, and living in Babylon during Nebuchadnezzar's exile of them, they assimilated Aramaic as their predominant colloquial language. And so that's when, after the Holy Temple was rebuilt, and Cyrus and Darius authorized the rebuilding of the temple and released them to the Jews and the Hebrew people, the Israelites, back to the Holy Land, and the temple being rebuilt, worship reinstituted. The priests, the rabbis, they kept reading the Hebrew Torah and found themselves having to always stop and translate for the lay people into Aramaic. And so this was the first authorized translation of the Hebrew Torah into Aramaic. It's called the Targum, which simply means translation. And the oldest versions, again, date back to the diaspora, to the rebuilding of the temple, 400 BC. And, 100 to 200 years before even the Greek Septuagint was written in 300 BC. And so, it's the oldest translation. And when you read and study the Targum, you'll realize that just about every chapter and every verse has additional information. And when you study and read it, it brings to light the Bible in greater clarity than any other text and any other book or material, in my opinion. And so I would study and read that first and foremost.
Great. I wanted to be sure and add, I wanted you to mention the new books that you've just released, the last in the trilogy of the Acts of the Apostles, and since our last show you haven't mentioned at all, and the new one about the infancy gospel, not gospel, but Christ.
Right,
infancy.
the early childhood, yeah.
Yeah, and then also mention the new PDF feature that we have.
Yeah, this is a very interesting, and this is something that I was not really good at doing, but I know a lot of you are Kindle and ebook readers, and so Kathy and Carol suggested to me that we create a spot on sacredwordpublishing.net to provide the ebooks and the PDFs, because I didn't want to release them on the Sacred Word as far as the Lulu site, because it clutters it up, and so we did decide to create a separate place for people to get the PDFs and ebooks if they so desire. And so we are going to be making all of them available, and you can find that at sacredwordpublishing.net. I haven't been to the website to see how Carol has it set up, but she is getting that set up. With regard to the last trilogy that I worked on, it's called The Great Commission, and I made mention of some of that last night, and I read from some of those texts. But the Great Commission, where Christ authorized all of the apostles after the Holy Spirit came upon them to go out 2 by 2 into the world and to teach the world, to proselytize to them the gospel, the good news of his resurrection, and how he was the way and the truth and the light. And so that's what they did, and they encountered many different things, overcoming many obstacles, and many individuals being involved with them in the early establishment of the church. But there's only one book of Acts in the King James Version of the Bible. But as I put together in this 3-book set, The Great Commission, there are literally dozens of texts which speak about the different apostles, not just Paul and Peter, but Matthias and Matthew and Luke, and so many of them, Andrew, and others that have gone forth, even some females that were involved with the different apostles in sharing and bringing forth the truth and helping them to convert entire peoples from different parts of the world. And so you can find that 3-book set, the Great Commission, book 1 and 2, on the Acts and the Gospels of the various apostles. And in the 3rd book, I compiled all of the apocalypses, which are the books about the end times and about the last days and the final generation. And if you read and study that particular book, it gives you a great understanding of the end of days, according to the scriptures that have been laid out from various apostles, not just, because most people are familiar with Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13, but there are similar gospels. The Apocalypse of Peter, it repeats those same stories from a different angle. The Apocalypse of Thomas, the Apocalypse of Elijah. There's all these different apocalypses, which speak about from the various patriarchs, going even back to Adam and Abraham, the stories of the end times and how it would unfold and what would be the signs of his coming. And so I put all those together for people that were interested in the study of the end times. And then there's the infancy, the Yeshua Christ, the infancy, the childhood, and the lost years of Christ. Because again, the canonical material, there's only one story of his early teens when he was 13 years old. And then everything else is lost. And so, all right, we'll be right back, everyone, for second hour. Welcome back, everybody, for second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio. I have as co-host with me this evening, Kathy Dunson. We are doing a Q&A show where we're answering all the questions, and we'll be doing this once a month. Really quickly, I was speaking about the infancy gospel that I just also created and released and compiled. Again, in the canonical materials, you only find one story of Christ when he was 13 years old, and he was following his parents home, but he separated himself and went back to the temple, and they found him answering questions to the Pharisees and the elder rabbis there in the synagogue and also in the temple, and they were amazed at his knowledge. And this is another one of the themes that comes out within the infancy gospels, where they tried to take Christ to be schooled by different teachers and schoolmasters. And even as young as he was, he knew more about the alphabet and what all the different symbols and all of that actually meant than the school teachers. And all of them, there was multiple attempts to take him to be taught by them. And then finally, Joseph and Mary gave that up because the teachers, basically said that they couldn't teach him anything, that he knew more than they did. And they asked him basically not to bring him back because they felt, like they didn't know nothing in comparison to this young child who was schooling them on the things that they were trying to teach them, him upon. And so, and I do recommend that people read and to study those as well, because I find them deeply moving. I remember the first few times that I read the infancy gospels and a lot of the teachings of Christ, I was just deeply moved. I was Holy Spirit filled and moved to tears in studying and reading from this material. But also you have to know as well that there are, in my opinion, certain leanings that have crept into some of the scriptures, and that they try to portray Christ almost as if he's a little brat, and that he saying that he causes the death of children, or that he in some way abuses his authority, or that that he doesn't know that he's God incarnate, but that he acts as if he's like a little spoiled brat. When in truth, if you study and read about the narrative, even when he came in with immaculate conception, and it says in the history of Joseph the carpenter that he entered into his mother's womb himself, and because he's God incarnate, he can do these kind of things, and that when he came out, he was speaking to Mary and telling her about how he's the Son of God. And so he always knew that he was God. He was never just a normal human child. He was never just another normal human being. He always was God incarnate. And so anything that says otherwise is downplaying the divinity of Christ, in my opinion. And so you have to be aware of that with regard to, because there are Greek, Hebrew, and Latin manuscripts, as well as there are Irish manuscripts. There's many manuscripts about the infancy of Christ all throughout the world, but some of them have been tainted. One other thing, and then I'll go back to you, Kathy. You had asked me about the works of Enoch, or the book of Enoch, and which one would be the best one to read. And in my opinion, if you want to study the books of Enoch and all the material connected to Enoch, you can't get a better book than the one that we released through Sacred Word Publishing. It's called The Collected Works of Enoch. And the reason being is because not only does it contain the first books 1, 2, and 3 of Enoch that most people are familiar with, but it also has within it many other different books and extra biblical texts which most people are not familiar with and have never had a chance to read. And I'll share with you the index of what I'm talking about. In this particular book, The Collected Works of Enoch, which we compiled, the first is the account of Enoch the prophet, which was a Greek text that was just recently found in 2006. It's only been released to the public for a short time. And again, most people don't know about it and have never heard about it and have never had a chance to read it. But we include it with our compilation of the works of Enoch. The second aspect is the Book of Jubilees, chapters 3 and 4, which speak about Enoch in great depth and provide more information about him, his life, and how he taught the kings of the earth during his life when he was here, before he walked with God. And again, this is, people that don't read the extra biblical materials, they don't know about this aspect, but it gives great detail as to who Enoch was and how all the kings of the earth looked to him for advice. Then we have, of course, the Book of Enoch, which is Enoch 1, which most people are familiar with. Then we have the Book of the Secrets of Enoch. And then we have the Aramaic Dead Sea Scroll fragments of Enoch 1. And then we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, the fragmentary, the Book of the Giants, which is similar to the story of the Watchers in the first book of Enoch. Then we also have included the other, it's called the Book of the Book of Augeas the Giant. It's a Mandean text, which is similar to the Book of the Giants, but Augeas is the son of Og, and so it's also about the giants and how they were given and warned about their coming destruction. And then we have a separate text called the Midrash of Semyaza and Azazel, which is a story not very, people are not familiar with, but it's about Semyaza and Azazel and how they were the leaders of the rebellion, the leaders of the Watchers that coming down took wives from the daughters of Cain and created the race of giants known as the, what we see as the Rephaim. And then we also have chapter 100 of the Kebra Nagast included in this particular text. And then we have another text which not a lot of people know about. It's called the Armenian Vision of Enoch the Just, which is a text that, again, not a lot of people have had a chance to read. And it's another one of those extra biblical books which gives you greater insight into the end of days and, the visions that Enoch was given with regard to the last generation, that distant generation that Enoch writes about in chapter 1 of the book of Enoch. And then you have, as to round it all up, the third book of Enoch, the Hebrew book of Enoch, which was written about Rabbi Ishmael, and he is given a vision of Enoch in his conversion to the angel Metatron. And that's a Hebrew text, and those are the, again, the three books of Enoch, which most people are familiar with, are contained within this collected works. But then all of these other texts, which most people are, again, not familiar with. And so if you are a fan of Enoch, his work, his life, and you want all of the texts associated with him, and you want to study him in fullness, well, in my opinion, this is the book to get, because it compiles it all together in one book, and you don't have to buy a bunch of different separate. And then again, most of these are not in print anywhere else. The Armenian Vision of Enoch the Just, and also the first portion, the account of Enoch the prophet, those have not even been printed anywhere that I've seen. So
it's a beautiful book, and it's only $25 in the softcover. I just can't. I can't. It's really cheap. I wanted to mention that we've just recently added on the website in the store. If you click on the different books, you can see the index, what the different chapters are, what's included within the book. That's a new thing, and that's really nice.
Yeah, that gives people a great idea as to what the contents are. And also, if you are interested in getting bulks, like a lot of people, when they discover our books, and especially when they realize that we publish in 14-point font, which is a little bit larger size than most publishers. Most publishers publish in 12-point font. Our books are easier to read, easier to see, and less tiresome on the eyes when you are, reading for long periods of time. And I most certainly prefer reading our books because of that. And I like reading larger text. It's certainly easier on the eyes and less stressful to the mind, in my opinion. And so if you are interested in bulk, just contact Kathy. We are often putting out discounts. Like there was a 25% discount.
It finishes tonight.
Yeah, it finishes tonight. But just contact us and let us know that you are interested in purchasing multiple books, and we will let you know about the discounts that we have going, and and how to take advantage of that so you can get multiple titles at a lot cheaper rate. And so
yeah, that's a good thing. Okay, you ready for another one?
Yes.
Okay, this is about the Sabbath, and this is from Atef. I come from Egyptian background, and Arabic is my mother tongue. The word Sabbath or Sabbat, Coptic and R, means rest or being still. It also means Saturday. It may be worth noting that Hebrew and these languages are from the same roots and are extremely similar. Now, whether you're a Christian, Jew, Muslim, or atheist, which all live in our land, the word is the same and means the same. Now, whenever I read Sabbath in the Bible, it's the same as if you read Saturday. I gave me some screenshots too. You can check any Arabic calendar to see it is the word Saturday. Also means rest and being still. Also, it shows the word Saturday in Arab or Coptic, where it says Sabbath in English. Also, there are several clear indications in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and more that 6 days you labor and the seventh you rest. So it's clear that it's always the seventh day we rest. This contradicts having a month where Sabbath is a Wednesday and another where Sabbath is a Friday, because this would violate the seventh day clear instruction in the Bible. And so that's what he's asking about, the Sabbath being on the seventh day for rest.
Yes, and that is true, but it was only after the Sabbath was fixed to the Saturn's day, that it became so. But previous to that, and when you go back to more ancient times, that Sabbath was determined by the Kadesh, and also by the appearance of the waxing crescent, the first sliver of the waxing crescent. And I confirmed this in a show recently that I did and that we released. It's called The Enochian 354-Day Lunar and 364-Day Solar Calendar and How They Work Together. You can find that on YouTube, where I go through and I explain how it's only by understanding that Enoch describes both a 354-day lunar calendar and a 364-day solar calendar and how they work together, that one can really keep track of time. Because the Most High gave us both the sun and the moon and the other stars as heavenly luminaries for the determining of the days, the weeks, the seasons, the years, the Levitical feast days. And so in order to understand God's calendar and the time and the passing of it, as is spoken about in the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, which if you want to know more of what I'm talking about, you can look to my 9th book, Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, where I explain all these things within that particular book, and I break down and decipher and decode every portion, every passage, and every chapter of the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries within that particular text. But anyways, it wasn't until the 4th century, during the time of Hillel II, that because the Romans were persecuting the Hebrew people and forcing them to take on the Julian solar pagan calendar, that time was separated from what is the phases of the moon. But previous to that, if you understand that the moon helps us to determine the Sabbath, it's very easy to keep track of time. And you have to also understand that there was no written calendar in the ancient times. And so the only way that they could keep up with the months and also the weeks was according to the moon, because the moon is the perfect luminary for the tracking of the weeks. And the reason I say this is because its quarterly phases determine the 4 weeks of each lunar month, and also the alignment with Sabbath. The first quarter moons aligns with the first Sabbath, the full moon with the second Sabbath, the third quarter moon with the third Sabbath, and the lunar conjunctive moon with the fourth Sabbath. And so even if you did not have a written calendar, anytime on God's calendar, you look at the moon, even if you couldn't see it for a couple days with it being cloudy or whatever, you can tell which week we were within which Hebrew month according to the sliver of the moon, just by sighting it in the nighttime skies. And so it was easy, even if you were, for instance, if you were locked up in the king's dungeon for a few months or whatever, you get out, you don't have a written down calendar. You look up into the night sky, you see the moon, you see what phase it is, you know what Hebrew month you're in, and then you're good to go. You can keep track of time again according to the phases of the moon. And so the moon was the key for helping the ancient people to keep track of time. It was their written down calendar. All they had to do was look up into the skies to know where they were. You can't do that with a Gregorian or a Julian or a solar calendar. You can't just come out and then determine what month and what, near what week it is according to something in the heavens, because there's nothing. The calendar has been divorced from the moon since the time of Hillel. And so ever since Hillel established Sabbath as being once every 7 days, then yes, it's been on a weekly cycle. But again, you can't just go out. You have to have a written calendar in order to determine what day it is. There's nothing in the heavens that you can go out and look to for such determination unless you are following the Enochian, the ancient Hebrew Enochian calendar, which, right now we're right at the first quarter moon, which means that we're aligned with the first Sabbath. In fact, tonight is the first Sabbath of this particular month, because it was last Thursday that on the Feast of Trumpets that we had Kadesh, the sighting of the new moon. That's when all the trumpets were blown in Israel across the land. The waxing crescent was first seen, and they blew the shofars. And so everybody knew that this was the beginning of the lunar month. And so every 7 days after that sighting of the new moon, you have Sabbath aligned with the different phases of the moon. And so because it's the first quarter moon tonight, this is also the first Sabbath. In 7 days, it will be a full moon, and that will be aligned with the second Sabbath. And so it's very easy to keep track of where we are according to Sabbath and according to the Hebrew months, because, we're in the month of Tishri, the 7th month. And so no matter where you are, you can just look up at the moon, especially for those that have been watching it for a very long time. You can tell by its progression and the amount of light it contains as to where we are on the monthly calendar. Very easy to determine, and you don't have to have it written down.
Mm-hmm. Okay, different subject. Synagogue of Satan. This is from Wilo. Are the people who live in Israel that call themselves Jews and are not, are they the seed of Cain and behind the New World Order, the Illuminati? Some have said these are the people in the Vatican and also the Jesuits. Can you clarify this? And also from Tracy, she asked about the Synagogue of Satan, and she said, could you please explain the history of the serpent seed? We're not going to go into all this. I was trying to connect them. The Sadducees and Pharisees. I know. I wanted to get a snippet of it. How it pertains to Yeshua, who Yeshua called the Synagogue of Satan. So we'll just connect in that way.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's a really good question. And again, the Synagogue of Satan, those that say they are Jews but are not, those are the children of Cain, the seed of the serpent, because they are the ones that during the time of Joshua, when Joshua was going into the promised land, they acted as if they were from a faraway land, and they pretended to be people from a very long and that they had taken this distant journey, and they came and made an alliance with Joshua and the princes of Israel. And then so Joshua spared them and made them scribes unto the Pharisees, and they became helpers to the scribes and the Levitical priesthood. And so by the time of Christ, they are the ones that became the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and that they had taken over the authorities as far as the churches and those that were looked to for the determination of, the understanding of the law and the understanding of the Torah and things of that nature. And yes, they are also those that are seated in the Vatican Church, the Pope and all them that have taken over that particular role. They are the ones that have created the counterfeit church, that have stolen the authority of what was once given to and determined by the Levitical priesthood as the 12 tribes, the tribe of Levi, which, the priesthood had fallen and gone through them. But anyways, and so, again, that's a very detailed and very deep story. I cover this in the Great Contest. I speak about how the seed of the serpent goes through Cain, and how it also goes through Ham, and specifically through Canaan post-flood, and how it ties into the Amalekites and the Kenites. Yeah, that's book two, and also book 3. I'll be, elaborating on that in book 3 as well. But they are like the Rothschild families and those that are sitting on the thrones of the world today. You will see that and there was an individual named David Livingston who does really excellent work with this regard. I haven't really ever heard anybody else break it down like he does, but he speaks about the strategic marriage that is followed through these particular bloodlines, and how these rich elitists, industrialists, bankers, philanthropists, these particular families that are all New World Orders and part of these secret societies, that in certain groups, they have to be of Jewish descent in order to be allowed even to be initiated into these particular groups. And so this is what Christ was referencing when he says those that say they are Jews but are not, because they parade as if they are the Jewish people. And so it's not all of the Jews that are in the land of Israel, but it is those that are ruling over the governments, just as they rule over the governments of most countries of the world. And so, yeah, that is the New World Order Synagogue of Satan. We'll be right back, everyone. All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. I do want to address something that was spoken about in the chat room, and it was regarding the destruction of the Sodomites and why it was that God brought judgment down upon them. First, you have to know that the Sodom and her sister cities, Gomorrah, and also there were other 3 cities in the plains of Shinar that were destroyed in similar manner, that not only were they involved in perversion, such as the giants were with regard to homosexuality and bestiality and all kind of abomination, the worship of fertility festivals, these Bacchian, orgiastic, Dionysian rites and things of that nature. But I'll share with you a passage just to give you an idea as to the wickedness of them and why it was that the Most High brought judgment down upon them. And this is also from one of our books that it's from a text called The Writings of Abraham, which you cannot even find anymore online. And we published it as the Serpent Seed, the Children of Perdition, in a very small book. It's like 160 chapters or something, but very interesting reading. It says this: "Wherefore, Abraham, hast thou looked upon the iniquities of Sodom and her sister cities? For they have provoked the Lord with their abominations. For 4 times in each year they gather together to sing and dance before their idol gods. And when they are dancing, every man layeth hold upon the wives and daughters of his neighbors, and lieth with them. And this they do without authority from God, which thing is an abomination in his sight. But behold, this is the least of their sins. For no man is safe who entereth their city, for when a stranger entereth there, they will take from him his goods by force, and they will abuse his body, for both men and women will they bind, and crowds of the Sodomites will gather about them and lie with them by force, until everyone who desireth to lie with them hath done so. Now it is a wicked thing that men or women should be forced to lie with another against their will, but here the whole city uniteth to force this wicked thing. Moreover, when they have stolen a man's goods and abused his flesh, they will torture him. And when they tire of torturing him, they will leave him naked and without food or water to die in the streets of their city. And it is forbidden by the law for anyone to help such a one by giving him food or drink. Moreover, the people of these cities have numerous idol gods before which they practice every kind of abomination without authority. Wherefore the Lord has sent us to gather the righteous out of the cities before they are destroyed. So saying, the 3 embraced me and kissed me and went out their way toward Sodom. And so you can see that again, we're not giving the fullness of the kind of abomination and the wickedness which was taking place in these particular cities, and that when you study the extra biblical material, you get a greater insight into the kind of real wicked, perverse things they were involved in and doing. Kathy?
Speaking of wicked, here's another question.
All right.
Why can't we see the form of a reptilian, but we only see their human form? And let me give you another question that's kind of related. This is from Susie. With so many people having shifting serpent seed eyes like many celebrities and even a high school student on my school bus, are all these people demonically possessed? I understand many are like the celebrities who have sold their souls. That seems obvious, as many of them even publicly say so.
Yeah, and I'm going to tie this to a story that I just recently read and heard about. Many of you know about the black-eyed children and about how many of them people have been reporting seeing them, and how they come to people's houses and they knock on the doors and they wait for you to invite them in. That just like Satan, or just like these demonic entities, that you have to open the doors in order to invite them in, and that doing so they will come in, and then they will subject you to demonic influence. But anyways, just recently, 2 of these individuals, 2 18-year-olds, a male and a female, they were brought into police custody, and they were examined, and their eyes were completely blacked out, and this was verified in police story, and that they had gone to a particular some hotel, and that they were trying to get the master key in order to gain access to some people's rooms, and that they had stolen a maid's uniform and also some workers' overall, and that they were about to, start entering into these people's rooms when the cops came and found them and then took them into custody. And strangely enough, there was no existence of them and no reports of their, being spoken about as runaways or anything like that. But intriguing story. But with regard to the reptilians, in 2 Corinthians, it says that even Satan can present himself as an angel of light, and that even his ministers do so, and that they can take on all form in presenting them even as workers of light. And so with regard to their shifting, why don't we see them in those particular forms? Well, many people do. And there have been many people that even Princess Diana reported on seeing them in these particular forms. And so I think it's said that it is dependent upon whether they consume blood in order to hold these human forms, and that often they don't.
I think I've heard that, like, during the rituals when they're really frenzied, that they might shift, and
they
you
shift,
would see,
yes. Yeah, and that a lot of people, you know, again, in these ceremonies and when they are doing these blood rituals and these blood rites, that certainly people have seen them in these forms and have reported it as such. But there's a particular text you can look to for confirmation of what I'm talking about, and it's called the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And specifically in tablet 8, it speaks about them as being these serpent-headed beings and how they took over the councils of men and how they rule over man in our place, and how they, you know, basically did this covertly, and how they rule over and determine the fate and destiny of man even into this day, having done so so very long ago. But that text, and there's another one called the Testament of Amram, which is the father of Moses, and he speaks about seeing the Watchers as being in a viper form and viper shape, and how they vie for the souls of humanity with the angels of the Most High. Michael in specific is mentioned in that particular text. But yeah, and if people are interested in learning more, I write about these things in great detail in my book, Sons of God, chapter 14, The Flying Fiery Serpent. And even in this new book, I speak about the, and also in the Firmament, where I talk about the antediluvian times, the destruction of Atlantis, and how it was that the Anunnaki, the dragon-like, the serpent-like entities, ruled over the ancient peoples, and how they tied together to the Nakash, which beguiled Eve, and why it was that Cain, when he was born, he was said to have a seraphic appearance. This is also why Christ references the Pharisees as being a den of vipers, and being of their father the devil. He calls them the serpent seed, the den of vipers. There's so much connection to this seraphim or dragon-like entity, these viper bloodlines.
Your book that followed The Firmament, which The Firmament is still my favorite because I have not read this one yet. Paradise, what is the full name of it?
Yeah, Paradise, the Sides of the North, and the Mount of the Congregation.
Thank you. Question related to that. I want to ask about the central mountain, if there is any, in the center of the plain where the Aurora Borealis is. What is the name for this mountain?
It is called Rupes Nigra, which means the black rock. And the reason it is called such is because it is a black lodestone mountain of which upon nothing grows. No green vegetation. It is said to be completely smooth, and that nothing can gain even a foothold on it, that a man that tries to climb it cannot gain a foothold. And this particular lodestone mountain, it's also called Mount Meru or Mount Sumeru, Mount Olympus. It's referenced as Mount Zion or the Mount of the Congregation within the Bible. That this is that mountain which Christ was tempted. Satan, when he took Christ to an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and said that if you would just bow to me, show me a little homage, I'll give you all these kingdoms. And, Christ basically said that his kingdom is not of this world, and that, those kind of things. And so this is that particular mountain, and I describe this in my new book on Paradise, the Sides of the North, and the Mountain Conflagration. I explain how this mountain exists at the very center of the earthen plane, how there is also a whirlpool there which connects to a hollow earth entrance into the interior of the earth, and that this is where John also saw an angel fall from kind of where the Mount of the Congregation is located, and that he was given the key to the bottomless pit, that the opening, what Job 26, what Job describes as where hell hath no covering, it's called the void of the north, that this is where there's this opening into the interior of the earth. It's also described that this is what, supposedly Admiral Byrd had gone into, and that there's also a description of it as being this grand whirlpool, this abysmal chasm in the stories of Odysseus. It's Jason and the Argonauts, and also Aeneas. It's called Charybdis. It's a reference as a sea monster, but it's actually this bottomless pit. And in this particular book, I also bring forth those stories from those particular texts and describing this particular lodestone mountain. And I also bring forth the stories of the different explorers that were said to have achieved going up there and coming back, and how all that is connected to, the lodestone mountain, and also that this abysmal chasm is said to swallow the oceans of the world, and then every 6 hours to shift direction. So it will drink the oceans of the world and create the low tide, and then 6 hours later expel them out in geyser, and then flood the earth and create the high tides. And then 6 hours later, it has this cycle twice a day where it switches tides. And so, yeah, I explain all this in this new book, and it's fascinating. It gives great detail as to the true structure of our enclosed world system, as described by the ancient cosmology.
And you finish it with the chapter on the Ever New Tongue.
Yes, and the Ever New Tongue is a fascinating read. It's another one of those ancient texts which most people don't know about, have never had a chance to read, and it's an Irish text that describes how the cosmology was created in circularity, to the circle of the earth being inscribed upon the waters of the deep, on the square, the earth with the square four corners of the earth, and all of that. And that particular text is absolutely mind-blowing, and I do recommend people read it. You won't find it anywhere else except for in the last chapter of this Paradise book, and I do publish it there in full for those that have never heard about it.
Well, let me finish with, I just have a couple questions. I'm trying to keep them related. One
Sure.
question that I'd had was, is it 3, 7, or 10 heavens? Why do we have questions about the number?
Really good question. And yes, in the Bible, it is separated into 3 heavens. It is said that that above the earth we have 3 heavens, the first being the lower atmosphere, the second being the outer space where the luminaries are, and then above the vaulted dome of the earth is called the 3rd heaven, the height of heights. But as I explain in this particular book, that those heavens below the firmament, below the solid structure of the vaulted dome, which extend down towards the plane of the earth, that area is often divided into 7 heavens. And so it is described in the Ascension of Isaiah, the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, in many different places, in Baruch and the Apocalypse of Abraham. Many different patriarchs were taken through these seven heavens, and they describe this area as being the seven concentric rings where these seven planets of the universe hold habitation. And what I'm referencing specifically is that the sun and the moon are included along with Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. And they are counted as the seven planets of the universe, and that all these different planets, including the sun and the moon, because they are considered to be planets too, they all hold circuit on one of these seven different levels. And so that's where the confusion lies for a lot of people. They don't understand that it's basically the same thing. It's just that the heavens below the vaulted dome are often divided into these seven specific layers or levels, and that it is where those particular planets hold circuit in their revolution around Polaris.
That makes sense. Well, and I had this question kind of related. Did we know our family and those we meet in life before we were born? And another person had asked, I heard you mention the cup of forgetfulness. Is that why we can't remember our previous existence?
Yes, and I covered this in great detail in the War in Heaven book, and also in this new one. I actually mention it in the Paradise book because there's a specific passage where I cover the seven heavens, and it actually has pre-existence as part of it. But anyways, yes, in my opinion, when we enter into flesh form, that we are required to drink from the cup for forgetfulness, and that doing so, we forget all the things that we knew as spiritual beings that had previous incarnation. And I'm not talking about at lifetimes where we're, reincarnating over multiple physical lifetimes. But we did pre-exist as spiritual beings with the Father and the Son, and that the Bible is clear that they knew us before the foundations of this world were established, and that we were known by the Father and the Son previous to entering into flesh form. That this was said of Jeremiah in chapter 1, verse 4 and 5, where the word of the Lord goes to Jeremiah and tells him, I knew you before you ever entered into the womb of your mother. I had foreordained you to be a prophet unto the nations. That this same thing applies to all of us, that we were previous to entering into flesh form. We were spiritual beings, and yes, in my opinion, especially those that are closest to us, that are born in our families, and that are part of those that are closest to us with regard to friend or acquaintance, or those that are our significant others, our twin flames, or whatever, that yes, we had previous association often and knowledge of each other before coming here and before entering into flesh form. And that even a lot of us that are now interacting with one another and doing the work that we do, it is quite possible that we somehow knew each other in previous embodiment as spiritual beings before entering into the flesh and before coming here to the earth to fulfill specific role and mission.
Okay, I have one last question. Well, I have several that we are going to have to move on to the next. But this one's really important. This is from Malav.
Right on.
He wants
Shout out to
know,
our brother Malav.
He wants to know, he better be listening because I'm asking. He wants to know what type of curry you like best and why. And he lists red curry, yellow curry, green curry, Penang curry, or massaman curry.
I like this this butter chicken curry. That it's one of my favorites. I get it. It's the kitchens of India, and it's a paste that you just mix in with this particular chicken, and you can mix it up and put it over rice, and it is fantastic. And you can cook it in like 10 minutes, and everybody I've turned on to it loves it. And I do
Where do you
recommend
get
people.
it?
You can get it on Amazon. It's called the Kitchens of India. And it's just a paste, and you just mix it with some diced up chicken, and you cook it up and put it over some rice, and oh my gosh, it is one of my most favorite meals. And
Wow.
yeah, everybody that I've turned on to it loves it. My friend Emily, who works for me, she had never even eaten curry, and now it's her favorite thing to ask if she can cook up. And yeah, you can get a package of 5 of these these pastes to mix up for like $10 on Amazon. So I do recommend people check it out. It's a butter chicken curry, but that's my favorite. And I love tikka marsala and tandoori and vindaloo. Those are some of my most favorite as far as Indian meals. And I love Thai food, as you know, Kathy, when we went to the Thai restaurant. But I love a lot of ethnic foods. I love Jamaican food. I love everything. I love Mexican, Chinese, Italian. I love it all. There's good food everywhere from around the world if you just open yourself to new. Yeah.
It's really good to know, because I feel like, when because I get a lot of articles, things that are really bad, and then I go to my muffin diet. My friends who know me know about I just feel like there isn't anything safe to eat.
Well, I've been mostly eating vegan food now. I eat a lot of the Morningstar stuff, and I've been moving away from eating.
That. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been moving away from eating meats, especially with every meal, and now I eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and fresh foods and salads, and I love all that now. I just love it so much, and I eat cherries and bananas and Kind bars usually for lunch, and then I'll eat a bigger meal for dinner. But
and since we're talking about it, you might mention the aloe water too.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite. My most favorite thing to drink is aloe water, and so check that out.
You can get that on Amazon.
Yeah, you can get that on Amazon. My most favorite flavors are wheatgrass, honey, peach watermelon, and apple pear. Those are the best, and they have aloe pulp in them. And especially for people that have ulcers or that have indigestion or problems digesting food, that the aloe is so very healing, and it can help you to cure ulcers, if you're bleeding on the inside, and it's so tasty. And there's the aloe pulp is included within the drink, and so greatly beneficial for you, so very tasty. I mostly drink water, but I do like these aloe waters as well, and so I usually drink 1 or 2 of them.
Laura will be very proud of us for talking about all this.
Yeah.
Oh, I did want to mention too. We never do. We've added a donate button for donating to the ministry for Zen Garcia Ministries on the FallenAngelsTV.com website. You can go there, and because there's a whole lot of stuff going on with the ministry, and we could use it.
Yeah, and for those that would like to, we'd like to make another donation to Kathy Tisa, who was affected by the Harvey hurricanes, and she's had to gut her house and everything. And so, if you can, and if you'd like to, we can give you a tax write-off